So now you decide to show up? Her voice was cold, nothing like the warm tones that had comforted me throughout my childhood. Grandma, what's going on? They told me you were in a nursing home. The words tumbled out as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Don't, she held up her hand, and the gesture felt like a physical blow. Your grandfather called you over and over. He was asking for you on his deathbed, wanting to say goodbye to his little scientist. But you couldn't be bothered to answer his calls or visit him. How could you be so cruel? Nellie, let me see the number he was calling, I said, my voice barely steady. Please, Grandma, I need to understand. Grandma disappeared inside for a moment and returned with a small notepad. Her hands were shaking as she showed me the number scribbled in Grandpa's familiar handwriting. That's not my number, I whispered, staring at the unfamiliar digits. I've had the same number since high school. They gave you a fake number. What do you mean, fake number? Grandma's stern expression began to crack. Your parents said you changed it when you went to university. They said you wanted to distance yourself from us. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Grandma, I came here during break. Emma was here. She wouldn't let me in. She said no one was home. Then Mom and Dad told me you and Grandpa were in a nursing home. Grandma's face went pale. Nursing home? We never. Emma and your parents told us you were too busy with your new university life to visit. They said, her voice cracked. They said you were ashamed of us, that we weren't sophisticated enough for you anymore. They said what? My knees felt weak. How could they? Grandma, they told me the funeral was at 2:00 p.m. today. When I got to the church, it was already over. They said I mixed up the times, but I didn't. I would never. The funeral was at 10:00 a.m., Grandma said slowly, realization dawning in her eyes. Your parents stood there and told everyone how ashamed they were that you couldn't even be bothered to come to your own grandfather's funeral. Emma was crying about how she tried so hard to reach you. I fell into her arms, then both of us dissolving into tears on the front porch. All the pain, all the confusion, all the manufactured distance between us poured out as we held each other. He died thinking I abandoned him. I sobbed into her shoulder. Grandpa died thinking I didn't care. Grandma stroked my hair like she used to when I was little, her own tears falling. We know the truth now. We know. After we dried our tears, Grandma picked up the phone with a determined look on her face. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Linda, yes, it's me. I need you, Robert, and Emma to come over right away. There are some important documents we need to discuss. No, it can't wait. Wait, they'll be here in an hour, Grandma said, hanging up the phone. I told them I had important documents to discuss. The lawyer is on his way too. When the doorbell rang, Grandma squeezed my hand. Stay in the kitchen until I call you. I heard them enter, Mom's practiced social laugh, Dad's formal greetings, Emma's bored sigh. Then Grandma's voice, unusually sharp. Please, everyone, take a seat. Mr. Harrison is here to read George's will. That was my cue. I stepped into the living room just as the lawyer was opening his briefcase. The looks on their faces were unforgettable. Mom's perfect smile frozen in place, Dad's face draining of color, Emma's mouth hanging open in shock. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began reading. I, George Walker, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament. The room was silent except for the rustle of papers. First came the house, left to Grandma along with a substantial sum for her ongoing care and maintenance. Then came the surprise that made Emma's face turn red with anger. To my granddaughter, Nellie Walker, I leave my newly constructed laboratory facility at 1420 Pine Street, fully equipped and ready for her research work. All necessary permits and paperwork have been processed and finalized. I couldn't believe my ears. Grandpa had built me a lab, my own research facility. The remainder of my estate, Mr. Harrison continued, is to be divided equally between my granddaughters, Nellie and Emma Walker. Emma's chair scraped against the floor as she stood up abruptly, but Grandma raised her hand. "There's more," she said, pulling out a letter. "Your grandfather wanted this read as well. Where should we put this one?" Grandpa would ask each time I brought home a new trophy or diploma. "In the box with the others," I'd say, pulling out my special cardboard box from under the bed. I never displayed my awards, partly because I didn't want to seem boastful, but mostly because I knew they made my parents uncomfortable. Emma, of course, had her own take on my success. "Nobody likes a know-it-all," she'd sneer, but then turn around and say, "Hey, can you help me with my science homework, and maybe just do it for me?" "Emma, that's cheating," I protested. "Nellie, help your sister right now," Mom would inevitably command. Family helps family. So I'd end up doing Emma's work, feeling like a fraud, but too afraid to stand up to my parents. It became a pattern. Emma would demand, my parents would insist, and I would comply. I often overheard my parents talking about me when they thought I wasn't listening. Their whispered conversations floated up the stairs to my room, where I'd sit with my chemistry set or the latest research paper I was studying. "I just don't understand where she gets it from," Mom would say. "No one in our family is like this." "Maybe she was switched at birth," Dad would joke, but the undertone of seriousness in his voice hurt more than if he'd meant it as a pure jest. One evening, after I won another science competition, I heard Dad's voice from his study. He was talking to Emma about her struggling grades. "It's not fair that she's so smart," Emma whined. "Listen, sweetheart," Dad's voice softened. "We need to focus on you, Nellie. Well, she'll be fine on her own." I pressed my back against the wall, fighting back tears. They thought they were justifying their neglect with twisted logic, as if being capable somehow meant I didn't need love or support. At school, I was that weird girl who spent lunch breaks in the laboratory instead of the cafeteria. Sure, people would come to me for help with their science homework, but real friendships, those were rare. Grandma and Grandpa were my rocks. They'd listen for hours as I explained my latest experiments or theories. They never made me feel like I was too much or too different. "Look what I found for you," Grandpa would say, pulling out scientific journals or new equipment for my experiments. "I thought this might interest you." But despite having my grandparents' support, the hole in my heart where my parents' love should have been felt vast and empty. I'd watch other families at school events, parents proudly hugging their kids, siblings supporting each other, and feel a deep ache in my chest. Then came the news that would change everything. I was graduating early. At 16, I'd completed all my high school requirements and had been offered a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. The day I left for university felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. The campus was buzzing with energy, and for once, I wasn't the odd one out in my advanced chemistry class. I met Sarah and Michael, who got just as excited about molecular structures as I did. For the first time in my life, I had friends who understood me. We'd spend hours in the lab, bouncing ideas off each other, getting excited about discoveries that would make most people's eyes glaze over. But even as I thrived in my new environment, a part of me still yearned for my family's approval. I'd call home weekly, hoping for more than the brief, disinterested conversations I usually got. "Yes, Nellie, that's nice," Mom would say when I tried to tell her about my research. "Oh, did you hear about Emma's new job? She's working at that fancy boutique downtown." I didn't know it then, but my time at university was the calm before the storm. It happened during one of my routine calls home. I was in the middle of my second semester, deep into my research project, when Mom's voice caught my attention. "And with your father's condition getting worse," she was saying to Dad, probably thinking I was on mute. "What about Grandpa?" I interrupted, my heart suddenly racing. "Mom, what's wrong with him?" There was a pause too long to be innocent. "Oh, Nellie, I didn't realize you were still there. It's nothing serious, just a minor health issue. He's already recovering." "I'm coming home," I said immediately, already mentally calculating the fastest route. "I can be there by tomorrow morning." "No, no, don't be ridiculous." Mom's voice turned sharp. "You need to focus on your studies. Emma is helping them out. Everything's under control." Something felt off about her tone, but I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Still, I called Grandma right after. "Oh yes, dear," Grandma said, her voice oddly distant. "Emma's been such a help. She comes by often to check on your grandfather." Emma, the same sister who used to say visiting our grandparents was boring. Something wasn't adding up. 2 weeks later, I stood at my grandparents' familiar front door, my heart pounding with anticipation. But instead of Grandma's warm welcome, I found Emma blocking the doorway. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her face a mask of fake surprise. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma." "How is he?" "No one's home," she said quickly, too quickly. "They're out." "Grandpa's sick. Where would they go?" "I don't know, Nellie, just go away." She started to close the door. "Wait," I put my foot in the doorway. "Let me come in and wait for them." "No one's home." She shoved the door hard against my foot. "God, you're so annoying. Just leave." Confused and hurt, I tried calling Grandma, straight to voicemail. This wasn't like her at all. She always kept her phone on for me. With nowhere else to go, I headed to my parents' house, hoping for answers. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen when I arrived. "Red, what are you doing home?" Dad asked, not even trying to hide his annoyance. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma, but they're not home. Emma wouldn't let me in." "Oh, honey," Mom interrupted, exchanging a look with Dad. "We were going to tell you. Your grandparents are in a nursing home." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "What? Why didn't anyone tell me?" It was a quick decision, Dad said smoothly. "They needed specialized care. It's better this way." "Which nursing home?" "I want to visit them." "They're under quarantine right now," Mom said quickly. "No visitors allowed. Maybe next time." Eventually, I did go back to university, but something felt terribly wrong. I tried to focus on my lab work, but my mind kept circling back to that afternoon at their door, to Emma's hostile face, to my parents' too smooth explanations. That terrible call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of an experiment when my phone lit up with Mom's number. The fluorescent lights of the university lab hummed above me as my heart started racing. Something about the timing of this call felt ominous. "Nellie," she said, her voice oddly flat, "your grandfather passed away last night." The test tube I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound echoed through the EMP lab like a gunshot. "What? No. When's the funeral?" My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Thursday at 2 p.m., don't be late." The way she said it felt strange, almost rehearsed. I didn't even bother cleaning up the broken glass. I rushed out of the lab, my mind spinning with grief and confusion. My beloved grandfather was gone, no chance to say goodbye, no final words of wisdom from the man who had believed in me my whole life. I took the first flight I could get, spending the entire journey trying to hold back tears as memories of him flooded my mind. At 1:30 p.m., I made my way to the church. The empty parking lot was my first clue that something was terribly wrong. My footsteps echoed in the silent building as I approached the entrance, dread building with each step. Inside, a custodian was methodically cleaning the floors. "The Walker funeral?" I asked when I inquired, looking up from his work. "That ended hours ago. They held it at 10:00 a.m. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The world started spinning around me as I grabbed onto a nearby pew for support. Frantically, I pulled out my phone and called my parents. "Oh, Nellie," Mom's voice dripped with disappointment. "You must have mixed up the times. We clearly said 10:00 a.m. "No," I said firmly, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "You said 2:00 p.m. I wrote it down." "I know you said 2:00 p.m. Where's Grandma? I need to talk to her." "Your grandmother is still in the nursing home. Dad cut in, and she doesn't want to see you right now. She's very upset you missed the funeral." I told my parents I was heading back to university, but my feet had other plans. I found myself driving to my grandparents' house, desperate for answers, for some kind of explanation that would make sense of this nightmare. The familiar street looked exactly the same. The old oak tree, the carefully tended garden, the wind chimes Grandma loved so much. My hands were trembling as I rang the doorbell. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened and there stood Grandma, the same Grandma who was supposedly in a nursing home, refusing to see me. "Grandma," I moved to hug her, relief flooding through me at the sight of her familiar face. But she stepped back, and the look in her eyes stopped me cold. Her face was hard and unfamiliar, like she was looking at a stranger instead of her granddaughter. Since I can remember, I have been captivated by the world around me in ways that appear to be confusing my family. My name is Nellie. I gathered leaves, rocks, and anything else I could look at with the small magnifying lens I had taken from a cereal box, while my sister Emma played with dolls and dreamed of being a princess. "Mom, why do leaves change color in fall?" I would inquire, displaying a maple leaf I had discovered that was really colorful. "Ask Nellie, your teacher." Emma would respond, without looking at me. "I'm busy helping Emma with her dance costume." This was a typical answer to my never-ending barrage of inquiries concerning science and environment. One afternoon when I was 7 years old, I recall sitting at our kitchen table with a variety of household objects arranged in front of me. Fascinated by the effects, I had started combining baking soda with various liquids. "What in heaven's name are you doing?" My focus was broken by Mom's words. "Observe this mess. Now clean this up. I need the kitchen cleaned since your sister's friends are coming over for her birthday celebration." Emma's birthday celebrations, with dozens of visitors, life-sized cartoon characters, and entertainment, they were always lavish events. In contrast, mine were small gatherings with only my grandparents and a plain cake. There was no more striking contrast. With another copy of the scientific encyclopedia in hand, Dad would remark, "Here's your birthday present, sweetheart." Please understand that I adored those novels. However, it became evident where our parents' true focus was as we saw Emma open her mountain of toys and technology at her celebrations. I'm grateful for my dad's parents, my grandparents. They served as a haven for me, a way to forget about being the odd one out in our family. They would throw wide their arms to me every weekend and school vacation. Grandpa would remark, "Tell me more about what you've learned this week, little scientist," as I reeled off my most recent findings, his eyes sparkling with real excitement. I never took Emma to our grandparents' house. She would gripe, "They're so boring. Besides, Mom and Dad are taking me to the new theme park this weekend." I would attempt to ignore the pain in my chest as I watched them drive away from the window. Why can't I go too? I did ask once. Oh, honey, Mom replied, absently rubbing my head. It wouldn't be fun for you. Rather of enjoying yourself, you would most likely want to learn how the rides work. That's the way it was. I was the one who didn't quite fit in, who asked too many questions, who liked microscopes more than makeup, and Emma was the typical one, the one who matched their ideal of what a daughter should be. When I began middle school, everything changed. The first person outside of my grandparents who appeared to really see me was my science teacher, Mrs. Peterson. Mr. and Mrs. Walker, your daughter has extraordinary potential, she said my parents at a session between the instructor and parents. Even though I was seated outside the classroom, I could still hear everything. I've never witnessed a pupil, so naturally understand difficult scientific ideas. We must talk about moving Nellie to our talented program. Gifted program. I recognized the contemptuous tone in Mom's voice all too well. That sounds like a lot of work. Where she is doing well. In addition, we must take Emma into account. Nellie shouldn't be given preferential treatment. My heart was sinking as I sat there. They would say no, of course. They never said yes to me. Then Grandma learned about it, though. She entered my school like a commander advancing on battle the following day. She stood in the principal's office and spoke in a hard, uncompromising voice that I will never forget. My granddaughter will take those exams and be given all the chances she is due. What her parents said doesn't matter to me. As the principal put it, but Mrs. Walker, we need parental consent. My son and his wife will be under my care. Just make sure Nellie has an opportunity. And she managed to do it somehow. My parents ultimately consented to let me take the placement tests after a week of heated debates. And I believe some financial pressure from my grandparents. I excelled in every one of them. Suddenly, my world expanded. The gifted program opened doors I never knew existed. International science competitions, academic olympiads, research seminars. I threw myself into all of it. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who thought like me, who got excited about the same things I did. I won my first international competition with a project about sustainable ecosystems, then another and another. My dear family, Grandma began reading, her voice strong and clear. I've watched over the years as favoritism has poisoned our family. To my son and daughter-in-law, your treatment of your daughters has been shameful. Each child deserves equal love, equal support. Stop, Emma screamed, jumping to her feet. This is ridiculous. Why should she get anything? Do you know what I had to do? All those hours sitting with that boring old man, pretending to care. Mom tried to shush her, but Emma was beyond control. You promised. She turned on our parents. You said if I played nice, if I visited him and acted like the perfect granddaughter, everything would be mine. You made me grovel to a dying man. The raw truth of their manipulation was finally exposed in all its ugliness. And now what? Emma continued, her voice getting shriller. Little Miss Perfect gets a whole laboratory, and I only get half the money. No, give me the house. She doesn't need both. She can have her precious lab. I sat there in silence, watching my sister's true colors emerge in all their violent shades. The perfect daughter act had finally cracked, revealing the ugly reality beneath. Well, Mom broke the tense silence. Nellie, you heard your sister. Be reasonable. Do you know how much we've invested in your education? All those science camps, competitions. I almost laughed. You didn't pay for any of that. Grandma and Grandpa did. That's not the point. Mom cut in sharply. Family means sacrifice. If you want to honor your grandfather's memory, you'll sign over your share to Emma. She needs it more than you do. Honor his memory. Grandma's voice cut through the room like a whip. She stood up, Grandpa's letter still in her hands. Let me remind you exactly what George had to say about this family's idea of sacrifice. She began reading again. To my son and his wife, your blatant favoritism has created a poison in this family. Your treatment of Nellie has been nothing short of emotional abuse. Well, you've turned Emma into an entitled spoiled. How dare you? Emma shrieked. No. How dare you? I had never heard Grandma's voice thunder with such ferocity. To a dying man, you all deceived and missold him. You have the gall to preach about sacrifice in family after preventing his cherished grandchild from saying goodbye to him. She approached the door and threw it open. Leave. You, everyone. I'm also sad that George left you anything at all. Emma. All you are is a pampered, self-centered daughter who inherited her behavior from her pampered, self-centered parents. With slamming doors and threats, they departed. In their aftermath, the home was strangely silent. 5 years have passed since then. Grandpa constructed a research facility for me, which I now operate. It's more than I could have ever imagined. I swear that I can occasionally sense his presence, proud and loving as ever, when I'm working late at night. Grandma comes around a lot. She enjoys asking questions about my most recent work when touring the lab over our Sunday supper together. She claims that taking scientific classes at the nearby community college has improved her understanding of my job. However, I believe she simply wishes to have the same enthusiasm for learning that Grandpa and I always had. Since that day, I haven't spoken to Emma or my parents. I occasionally see their numbers on my phone or their names in my email inbox, but I delete them without viewing them. I've made my decision, and they made theirs a long time ago. I discovered an old picture of Grandpa in one of his books the other day. A much younger me was looking through a magnifying lens in his yard as he pointed out something. His writing on the back said, "My little scientist will change the world someday." I now keep the picture on my desk. I've discovered that not all families are related by blood. Sometimes the people who believe in you, encourage your goals, and love you because of your differences, rather than in spite of them, are the real family.